Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, Episode 7.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. I'm excited today. We have a great story of someone who had an idea or an aha moment, as he likes to say, and then took massive amounts of action to achieve his dream. On today's podcast, I interview the person who created Entrepreneur on Fire, a 7-day-a-week podcast. I should note he did this when many in the podcasting community and most all the experts said it couldn't be done. Undaunted, he moved forward. Now, in less than 18 months, he's aired over 450 podcast episodes, delivering on his 7-day-a-week promise. I know he's getting at least over 300,000 downloads a month and is making over $100,000 a month as well. So he's come quite a distance in a very short period of time. Now, if that's all he had done, that would be enough. But no, he's also written a book, Podcast Launch, which provides not only his story, but also tells others how to launch their podcast. The Kindle version of this also comes with 15 video tutorials to help you get started in your podcasting journey. Again, this too would be enough, but nope. He also created a membership site dedicated to teaching people everything they need to know about podcasting. It's called Podcaster's Paradise, and it can be found at podcastersparadise.com. I recommend both Podcast Launch and Podcaster's Paradise to anybody thinking of starting a podcast. Both will be linked up in the show notes at cashcarconvert.com. And I also have to relate a little personal story here. I have to give a shout out to Podcaster's Paradise. And I was trying to launch my podcast at the end of December. I'm in the 11th hour trying to get this thing launched on December 31st. And I had a hiccup. I was having issue getting my episodes to upload into iTunes. So I popped over to Podcaster's Paradise, watched a few videos, got my problem solved, and was able to get launched on time. So I owe a big thanks to Podcaster's Paradise. So with all that, let me welcome the man responsible for Entrepreneur on Fire, Podcast Launch, Podcaster's Paradise, as well as Fire Nation Elite, his mastermind group, and probably the most enthusiastic person I know in podcasting, and that's John Lee Dumas. John, welcome to the show.
James, I am prepared to ignite. Let's burn this place down.
I knew you would be. I just knew it. So, John, this show is dedicated to people buying cash cars and getting them to change their life that way. So I like to start off with a car question. And my car question is, what is the first car you ever owned, and how did you come by it, and how did it work out for you?
So the first car I ever owned was a 1996 Pontiac Sunfire, and that was in 1996. So I was a very studious student. I was a 3-sport varsity athlete. I was actually a sophomore in high school at the time. And my parents always told me that if I stuck my nose to the grindstone, worked hard, got good grades, really excelled in sports, and committed myself to being a 3-sport athlete, that they would provide me with the means to get to practice, to get to school, to have a car. So back in 1996, they bought me a bright and shiny, I believe the sticker price was about $12,000, brand new Pontiac Sunfire, no frills, but it was the most beautiful car I had ever seen at the time.
I bet. I absolutely bet yeah, I got to say, of all the people I've mentioned this to so far, you've got the best car by far. So putting your nose to the grindstone definitely pays off. So good for you there.
Thanks.
Hey, well, my audience is full of people who are in debt and they're looking to turn their lives around and to make a change. And they may not be as familiar with podcasting and what you do on Entrepreneur on Fire. But what I'd like you to do is take me back to the day you had the idea of Entrepreneur on Fire and give me some of the backstory there to help frame our overall discussion.
I'd love to. And being a car podcast here, James, this is a pretty fitting story because my career prior to Entrepreneur on Fire, I was a commercial real estate broker, meaning I spent basically my life in a car, driving to work, driving to appointments, to showings, to clients' houses, you name it. I was always in the car. And I never liked really being stuck in traffic like nobody does. I never loved commuting. It just wasn't a passion of mine. So I fit those time periods in my car by listening and consuming to an incredible amount of podcasts. And I found some great ones out there, podcasts that you know and love as well, James, like Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income,
Yep.
Andrew Warner's Mixergy, Dan Miller's 48 Days. I loved listening to those podcasts, and they made my drives very bearable and sometimes even enjoyable. But one day I was stuck in traffic and I ran out of podcasts because even though there were a lot of great podcast hosts out there, they were all doing it on a weekly basis, just one podcast a week. And I very quickly went through all of their back catalog and came up at the end of the stick, and there was no more. And I knew their publishing schedule. I knew the next podcast wasn't going to be going live for about another 4 or 5 days. And I couldn't wait because I was going to go to the gym later that night to work out. And I love listening to podcasts while I exercise too. So I said, there must be other people out there like me. That was my aha moment, James. That was like the light bulb that turned on and said, there must be a huge segment of the population that drives to work every day and loves to consume podcasts during that drive to work, that exercises, that walks their dog, that wants to consume content during that time. Why is there not a 7-day-a-week business podcast that interviews an inspiring and successful entrepreneur and shares their journey? I decided to fill that void, James. I decided to step into that niche and claim it and dominate it. That was the day Entrepreneur on Fire was born. And here we sit 485 episodes later.
Wow, that's amazing. And, I got to tell you, I discovered podcasts not long after you had launched. And I can tell you, in the early days, I kind of discovered podcasting through Dave Ramsey. And from there, I linked up and found other people. And I remember having that feeling of running out of podcasts and kind of being at that point where I'm like, okay, I've listened to everything that's out there. What can I do? And I discovered your podcast, and I was so grateful because I always knew that I would have a new podcast every day that I could count on, no matter what anybody else was doing. So, I was one of those people that very early on found your podcast and really appreciated what you were doing.
Love it. You're my avatar, James.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So, I'm trying to help people go from where they are to where they want to be and to get them to take action. So once you had the initial thought, you're driving in your car, you have this idea for this 7-day-a-week podcast. How long did it take you to determine it was something that could really be something you could turn into a business and something you really wanted to attack? And how long did it take you to get going there?
So from day one, my mindset was that I was going to turn this into a viable business. I didn't know exactly how. I didn't know exactly what income streams I was going to create, but I did know from day one, James, that I was looking to make a viable business out of being a podcast host, out of Entrepreneur on Fire. So I always had that mindset. So I invested in myself often and early. I joined a mastermind that was $300 a month. I hired a mentor that was $1,000 a month. I invested in all the right equipment. I definitely did invest in myself, in my business. And there was quite a long time after I launched Entrepreneur on Fire, and I knew this was going to be the case, that there was not necessarily any monetizing going on because I was focused on creating as high a quality of podcast as possible and building as large an audience as possible before I turned on that monetization stream. And I was fortunate because I had avoided debt from some very great decisions that I had made in my previous careers. Number one being going to college on an ROTC scholarship, so having that paid for, so graduating college with no debt. Of course, that meant that I was serving my country for 4 years as an officer in the U.S. Army afterwards, which was a great paying job and allowed me to build up a savings. So when I did at 32 years old, launch Entrepreneur on Fire, I did so with no debt and with a savings that gave me that cushion, that runway. So I was able to focus day one and do that. And it wasn't really until 6 months after I launched a podcast, James, that I even tried to start monetizing. I knew I was going to down the road, but first and foremost, and I think this is a great mindset for entrepreneurs, I wanted to build an audience by providing quality podcasts and quality value on a consistent basis.
That's fantastic. So two things I wanted to dig out there. One is, you talked about you weren't sure, how this could be monetized or how much and some of those kinds of things. But what kind of money were you making at that time, if you don't mind me asking? Because I think that's an important thing. I mean, I know what you're making now, and that's such a huge number that most people can't even fathom that. But, you didn't need to make that much to have this be successful for you. So what was kind of your target when you first kicked this thing off? And I kind of think that's probably based on where you came from.
So the 4 and 5 years leading up to Entrepreneur on Fire, I had been in corporate finance. I was in commercial and residential real estate, and I was just a very hard worker, James. So I was putting my nose to the grindstone, and I was generating 6 figures in annual income on an annual basis for those 4 to 5 years, building up to completely quitting that career path and going full-time in Entrepreneur on Fire. So I did leave a 6-figure salary to pursue Entrepreneur on Fire full-time, where I knew for the first 6 months to potentially a year plus, I was not going to be monetizing to any level. And that definitely ended up being the case. For the first 6 months of Entrepreneur on Fire, it was mostly just red. It was just expenses, and it was just me learning the ropes and building an audience. But then at that 6-month point, I was able to turn on that income stream. And that was my first 5-figure month, was in April of 2013, which was 6 months post-launch.
Yeah, and just to give a little more of the backstory there, you had this idea in June. So did you leave your job immediately in June? And I know you launched in September. So there's another, 3-month period there. So are we really talking about 9 months of no income and only outgo at that point?
Absolutely. 9 full months. Because when I left my job in June, I had my summer of fire, and that was 3 months, head down, learning how to podcast, getting my first few guests lined up, just really building the actual business out before launch. So from June of 2012 until April 1st of 2013, that whole gap was pretty much no monetization, no income for me from Entrepreneur on Fire.
Okay. And I wanted to really get that out there because, the people listening, I want them to know you were able to take this risk because you had, an emergency fund that was going to last you more than a year, and you believed in what you were doing enough that you were committed. I mean, a lot of people who make 6-figure incomes, they would probably feel like maybe they had golden handcuffs, and even if they were, financially able to leave, I'm not sure they would have. So, what kind of gave you that spark to jump? What really, pushed you over the edge on that?
Golden handcuffs are real. James, on some levels, I had them for sure because I enjoyed the salary I was making. I enjoyed the life it afforded me. But still, at the end of the day, that's what they were. They were handcuffs. I was still having to march to the beat of somebody else's drum. And I knew that I would be willing to make half as much, live a little more frugally, and be able to wake up with knowing that the rest of that day, from wake up until when I put my head back on the pillow to go to bed at night, was on my own beating of my own drum, where that I could steer that ship that I was a captain of. That was what was important to me. And so I was able to take those golden handcuffs off, and it wasn't easy, but I was able to do it, knowing that I would be happier making $50,000 a year doing exactly what I loved than making $150,000 a year, which is what my income was at the time, doing stuff that I really wasn't enjoying that much. And so I was willing to make that trade-off and mentally have confidence. And James, I trusted in myself. I knew that I was a hard enough worker. I knew that I was scrappy enough where if Entrepreneur on Fire didn't work out for whatever reason, I was going to swing the bat again and swing the bat again. I mean, you look at all the great entrepreneurs that have come and gone, your Donald Trumps, your Henry Fords, they've all made so many mistakes, lost it all just to build it back up again. And so just because you don't hit a home run on your first, second, or third try, if you're an entrepreneur and you're passionate and you just go forward with confidence, chances are you are going to find something that resonates with you, that connects with you, and you can move forward from there.
That's a really great point. And I think the other side to that is even if people always fear the worst case, and I think they build it up oftentimes worse than it really is. And so, John, in your case, you were looking at doing potentially multiple attempts at becoming an entrepreneur until you became successful. And I think that's a great mindset, and I would encourage people to have that. But even if you had eventually had to put your tail between your legs and say, I'm going to go back to what I was doing before, that was still an option. You still had a great reputation, having been a hard worker in your previous job. So you knew you could land something else. So, I want to encourage people out there, think about what the worst case scenario really is. And you want to be prepared before you make a leap like this. But at the same time, think about what that worst case scenario is. It might not be as bad as you think. Am I right, John?
Absolutely. People love to picture Armageddon when they think that they're taking that leap into entrepreneurship, that if they somehow don't hit a home run that very first swing, that their world's just going to burst into flames and everything's going to collapse around them and they're going to be, destitute and homeless. And, that's what our mind does. I mean, it's a survival technique. We're trying to protect ourselves by saying, well, what if the worst case scenario happens? Because, back when we were cavemen, James, the worst case scenario was getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. I mean, that is reality.
That's pretty bad. Yeah.
So we have to always be thinking about the worst case scenario innately. That's what our minds are doing. But this day and age, I mean, there are so many opportunities. You have support systems, you have family, you have friends. I mean, they're there for you. And so this worst case scenario that people let stop them from starting really would never exist. And so, I really just want people to think, is it more of a risk to get up there and take that swing a few times and maybe fall on your butt a couple times? And yeah, you know what? Maybe you did fail, but failure makes you stronger, makes you learn. What about don't picture what's going to happen in a year from now if you fail. What's going to happen 50 years from now if you never even try and you're sitting there looking back over your life and saying, wow, I spent my life doing something 90% of my waking hours that I hated or that I did not like, that just made me a bitter, unhappy person. What would you rather look back at? Oh yeah, I remember that time that I failed and then I tried again and then I definitely made a mistake. I mean, this is our one chance at life, James. This is our chance to really get out there, take a swing, and be passionate about something and make a difference. And so when we do look back on our lives, we're saying, you know what? I'm proud that I had the confidence to chase my dreams.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the same way about people buying their cars. So many people put so much stock and identity into their cars, and I want them to take that 40, 50-year view and say, if I'm willing to drive something a little less expensive now, then I can really change my future, and I can send my kids to college, I can have my retirement fund, and whether somebody decides to keep their current job or become an entrepreneur, it's kind of funny. I always kind of laugh. MJ DeMarco kind of poo-poos Dave Ramsey as being the slow lane, getting rich slowly, right? And the funny thing is that the one thing they both have in common is they both say you have to live within your means, and it doesn't matter whether you're making $1 million a year or $20,000 a year. You have to live within what you make, and if you're exceeding that because of a car, college debt, whatever it might be, you got to get that in check first. So I think that's a really great point. I want people to take a longer term view and be much more intentional with their time and their money.
100%. And just to kind of capitalize on that, and me coming from corporate finance and really having a solid background in finance and in debt and really understanding the power of being in control of your finances, here we are, Kate and I, we're making over $100,000 every single month in, month out, and that income number is actually growing as we add more income streams to our business. But just a couple months ago, in the middle of this great income, we decided that it was time to actually get out and get a new car. It wasn't a new car. We decided that we were going to lease a car that was literally going to be less than $200 a month. Like, we weren't going to go get this, fancy, $500-$600 lease car. We weren't going to, to actually buy a car for $70,000 or $80,000, even though that was less than 1 month's income. We weren't willing to do that, James, because we really want to keep our month-to-month expenses low. And, for me being a finance guy, I'm a huge believer in buying your car outright if you can, carrying no debt, paying no interest on it, and just being able to put that money into other areas. With our situation, it's a little different right now. We never drive. Kate and I have one car that we put about 15 to 20 miles a week on. That's just going to the corner grocery store, because everything that we do is all involved within our office that we've created out of our home. So we are never using a car. We're barely ever driving anywhere. And so because of that, the mileage and just the flexibility of the lease did work out for us. But up until that point, I had never leased a car before. I had always been a huge fan of buying a good value and owning the car outright, because it's those interest payments. Those are the things that add up. That's money that you can never get back.
Yep, absolutely right. And depreciation is another big hit. It sounds like you went for a really conservative car, but the average car in the United States today costs $31,000, and that means the first year somebody's taking a $7,600 hit on just the depreciation. And with the median income being $51,000 a year, that's a pretty big chunk of change for somebody in that space. So for all you out there listening, listen, if you're making $100,000 a month, go lease your vehicle. God bless you. Go for it, But
keep it at $200 or less.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So
we have a Mazda 3. It's a car that has like a lawnmower engine, but it gets us from point A to point B. Every single month I see that, the $217 get deducted. I smile because it's, such a lower amount than you would think that we would have. Right. And I'm really happy that we made the right decision in that department.
Yeah, that's one of my phrases for people is I want them to invest in themselves and not things. And obviously with the income that you're making, you have plenty of money left to invest in yourself and your business. And obviously you did that on the front end, with Jamie Tardy from Eventual Millionaire and with the podcast Answer Man, Cliff Ravenscraft. I know that you made those investments early on, and you continue to do that. I mean, you're building your business. You're doing Podcasters Paradise, and I don't even know what is next on the horizon for you, but I know you're working on something else. I just know it.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I want to come back to is where did you get your financial values? I know I got mine from my parents, and I had to relearn some things because I didn't get necessarily the teaching that maybe I should have. So where did you get this mindset that you weren't going to have debt and all these kinds of things that allowed you to launch Entrepreneur on Fire?
It's definitely coming straight from my parents. I grew up in a household. My father was a very successful lawyer. He opened his own practice at the age of 28 years old, and he still owns that same practice today. He's grown his business. He's earned and saved multi-millions of dollars. So I grew up in a household that was a multi-million dollar household as far as what the income was coming in, but you would never know it from the outside. We lived in a very modest house in a very small town in southern Maine. I went to public high school. I went, to college on an ROTC scholarship because I had to earn my own way. I was always taught the value of the dollar, and I was always taught, to be frugal. And the key phrase that my father says time and time again is to always spend less than you earn, and never overstep your financial boundaries. And so he always made a very good living, but again, you would never know it. We always had two, very average cars in our driveway that were always bought in full, in cash on the spot.
Yep.
So, there was never any payments that were going on. My father, when he launched his practice back in 1978 or 1979, he worked his butt off to pay off that mortgage immediately. And that's like the same kind of idea with buying a car for cash. Get rid of that mortgage as soon as he could. And now he was debt-free both with his home and with his car. And that's when he really turned to investing all of this new disposable income now that he used to have to pay, like so many people have to pay their monthly mortgage and monthly car payments. Now he was able to direct those monies to investing in stocks, in bonds, in mutual funds. And he taught me those skills. That's why I developed a love for corporate finance and why I ended up working in the corporate finance field for John Hancock for a couple of years in Boston, because I loved finance and what can happen in compound interest and the power of investing in yourself in a company early and then watching that company grow like the Warren Buffett way. I've always been a huge Warren Buffett admirer for obvious reasons, and I've always followed his strictures to the T on a lot of different investing mindset. And that's what my father and my mother instilled into myself and my sister at a very young age, which is why I can honestly say at 18 years old, when I went to college on an ROTC scholarship, and they were actually paying me because I got a scholarship to serve our country as a first cadet and then as an officer, we get a $100 per week stipend. So I was actually getting paid to go to college and graduating debt free. I have never had more debt than I've had money in the bank. I've always been net positive, and I attribute that to my parents early on teaching me the value of being free and that way of living.
That's fantastic. And I'm assuming the work ethic came from the same folks. I mean, it sounds like your dad was, nose to the grindstone kind of a guy himself.
Very hard worker. He was the kind of guy that when he sensed opportunity, it was nonstop. There was different ebbs and flows for lawyers, just like for entrepreneurs. There's different cycles. Podcasting is super hot now. Maybe next year it'll be web TV. Maybe the year after that, it'll be something that's not even invented yet. And it's the same thing for a lawyer. I mean, sometimes it's workers' compensation. Sometimes it's social security benefits. Sometimes it's personal injury. You never know exactly what's going to be that hot topic. But when you find it, he was willing to just absolutely devote and dedicate his time, energy, and resources to dominating that niche. I saw that same opportunity in podcasting and took the exact same approach.
That's fantastic. Well, I do know that you're big on taking action. I mean, that, Entrepreneur on Fire would not be where it is right now if you hadn't, taken that massive action up front and continued with it. What advice do you have for someone out there who's not living their dream? Someone who's so in debt they can't even begin to even think about reaching for a dream, and may even believe that it's too far away to even start. Where would you recommend that they first start?
Know first and foremost that you are the author of your own biography. You literally, whether you know it or not, and whether you like it or not, you are steering your own ship. You are the reason exactly why you're in the spot you are right now. So why not make the decision today to change that and to write a new script or to write a new different page for tomorrow? And James, all that takes, wake up 30 minutes earlier tomorrow. Use those 30 minutes that you normally would be sleeping to actually learn a skill that you're passionate about, an entrepreneurial information tip, tool, or tactic that you think that you can actually move into for an industry or a niche. Then 30 minutes at night, stop watching reality TV shows before you go to bed. Sit there and actually use 30 minutes right before you go to bed to, again, improve yourself and improve your entrepreneurial mindset. In 6 months, James, nothing's changed except you're just waking up 30 minutes earlier, going to bed 30 minutes later, and using that hour towards good. And besides that, over the course of 6 months, nothing else will have had to have changed. And you'll be shocked at how far you've come with that 1 hour a day of investing in yourself by using that time to improve your knowledge. And you'll have a lot better idea about the direction that you might want to take your leap if and when the time is right.
That's fantastic. And I agree with that 100%. I've been doing the getting up early thing now for about the last, 15 months or something. And that's what's allowed me to launch this podcast and gave me the additional hours in the day that I needed to do that. And I know you're an ex-military guy, so I know they have the saying that, they do more before 7 a.m. than most people do all day. And I think that we as entrepreneurs have to adapt that mindset.
This is the reality. And I mean, people just need to accept this. It sucks waking up at 5 a.m. But guess what? It also sucks waking up at 7 a.m. It sucks waking up at 8 a.m. It's just a reality. Right. It's going to suck. So just make it actually worthwhile. So I get up at 5 a.m. every single day. I don't love it. I'm taking a shower, picturing crawling back into bed. But, I sit down in front of my computer, and you're right. By 7 a.m., I've done more work than a lot of people will end up doing all day.
That's fantastic. We didn't talk a lot about your backstory here as much as I know normally happens on podcasts that I've listened to where you've spoken. So is there a podcast out there you would have me point people to that really gives your backstory very well?
Yeah, how about episode 333 of Entrepreneur on Fire, where the tables are turned and I'm interviewed on my own show.
Oh, that's fantastic. That'll work. Okay, that one's
333.
Got it. Perfect. And John, can you tell me where people can best reach you? Where would you like for them to go out and find you?
So my headquarters, James, is eofire.com. That's where all the magic happens. I would love for you guys to come and check us out.
Fantastic. And I'll definitely send some people your way. John, I really appreciate your time today. You've been a fantastic guest. And anybody who isn't inspired by this story, I don't know what's wrong with them. This is just such a fantastic story. You had an aha moment. You turned it into a dream. And from there, you turned it into reality. So, and you did that by taking massive amounts of action. So that's fantastic. So with that, folks, if you want to get the show notes on this, you can go out to cashcarconvert.com and you'll be able to find all the information about this particular episode. And I also want to say, if you guys find this podcast helpful and you think it's helping you with your life situation, please make sure that it gets noticed. Go out to iTunes and leave a rating and review. Give us a subscription. And, I'd love to get a 5-star review, but the fact is, I want to make this show better. So give me honest feedback, whatever you feel, and I will learn and grow from that. So thank you so much for listening, and everybody have a great day. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you got as much out of that interview as I did. I thought John really rocked the interview and just absolutely gave us a lot of really good, actionable information. I think the first thing I'm going to point out is the obvious, right? I mean, when John made the decision to leave his job and start on his journey to entrepreneurship, he had already put enough money in savings that he could really, ratchet his lifestyle down and basically live on that money for over a year. So he was prepared to do that to live out his dream. So that's one thing. The second thing is that once he made a decision about it, he took action. So, I know those of you out there may be facing, debt, but I would say the same thing still applies. Determine the direction you want to go and start taking action against it. If you want to be out of debt, then start putting a plan in place and start executing on it to get out of debt. And it's no different. So I know you can do that. The other thing I'm going to say is that, John invested in himself. So, this may not be as applicable right now, if you're, facing, a mountain of debt. But, he invested in his own training. He bought into the best courses and mastermind groups to give him a leg up into the area he wanted to go. But so I would encourage you to, look for finding some like-minded people who can help you on your journey. So I think that is something that can still be actionable out of that. But I think my number one takeaway here is John says he learned his work ethic and how to handle money at the feet of his parents. So those of you out there, who have a mountain of debt and have children, they're watching you and they're learning how to handle money based on the way you do it. So they're going to model your behavior. I modeled the behavior I learned from my parents about the way I handled money for a long time. I finally overcame that, probably later than I should have. But the fact is, you can give your children a leg up by being financially responsible and teaching them that that's the way to handle money. They're a lot more likely to do that and stay with it if they see that that's the way you live your life. If you worship at the altar of car, they probably will too. The other thing I wanted to touch on here is John mentioned that he's got a leased vehicle. And, typically I would probably give somebody a harder time about this than I did John. But the fact of the matter is, folks, he's making $100,000 a month and he's making a $217 a month lease payment. That is just such a small amount of money relative to what he's making. It just really isn't relevant. So, whether he bought a Mazda 3 for $15,000 cash or whether he decided to lease it for some business reason, that's okay. My point for all the folks out there listening is really that I want you to have margin in your life. I want you to have the capability to live out your dreams. If you want to leave your day job and you have an entrepreneurial vision that you want to follow, you've got to take some steps to get there. And your first baby step is getting yourself out of debt. So that's kind of where I'm focused. But, for where he is, that $200 a month lease payment is really not even relevant. And even at that, he and his girlfriend are sharing a car. So think about that. The guy's making $100,000 a month and he and his girlfriend have one vehicle and they're sharing it. How many people out there, make so much less than that and feel like they need to drive a Mercedes? I hate to pick on Mercedes all the time. I guess I'll say, could be driving a BMW, right? My point is that even the fact that he's got a leased vehicle, he doesn't have anything that's, over the top. He's not driving a $100,000 car. So once again, it goes back to, what I've seen in other interviews that I've done so far. And that is that, these people are investing in themselves. They don't prioritize cars. A car is a tool to get you from point A to point B. And, And that's really what it is. So I think that was something I definitely wanted to touch on here. But again, my biggest takeaway is just the fact that, parents, just remember how much of a role model you are for your kids in every facet of your life. So, I'm talking about financial, but really everything that you model for them is what they're going to model back in their adulthood, at least in the beginning. So I appreciate you listening. I've already given the call out to iTunes, so I won't go back to that one. But I thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you'll be listening next time. Thank you so much.